Chris Franklin, a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to be here at the Comedy Lounge.
Yes, welcome back, man. Welcome back. We're happy to have you. Where do we even begin, Chris Franklin? Where do we start? Where would you like to start, Chris?
Oh, you've got the book, and I'm dreading this because I saw the in-depth research you did with the Dan Willis interview. So
right.
I'm worried about what
you
we
might find. Yeah, we found a couple of cold cases that are still open with you, Chris, that we want to get to the bottom of. No, listen, man. You're an Australian comedic icon. I don't know if that's news to you, but you are. You're a platinum musical artist. You've got a career spanning over the decades, but more importantly, you're a great bloke.
Oh, thanks,
and a lovely human being. So
it's weird being an icon now. That's 28 years I've been doing this now,
yeah.
And to be one of the old fellas doing it it feels really weird.
Tell me about that. Yeah, like so do you still feel mentally the same comic you were when you first started?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm 60 years old this year, and I still feel 20 when I'm up on stage. It's just when you're 60, it takes longer to walk up the stairs here at the Comedy Lounge. Sometimes I use the elevator.
Yeah. So when you first started, so you're saying 28 years. I mean, I'm terrible at math, trying to take it back. So 96 was your first time up on stage?
97 was.
97,
was,
okay.
Yeah,
97. And tell me about what brought you to stand-up comedy. What were you watching anyone early days on TV? Did you come across an open mic? What brought you to doing comedy?
I was actually homeless in Melbourne at the time, and I was drinking water in a bar in Richmond in Melbourne, and there was a comedian drinking at the bar that I'd seen a few years earlier on television on Hey Hey It's Saturday. His name was Chris Bennett. I went, you're that funny guy, and I started to recite 8 hours of old jokes saying, here's one you can use, here's the one you can use. And he said, if you like your comedy that much, there's a venue in St Kilda called the Espy, has comedy every Sunday. I'm hosting it this weekend. Come down, I'll put your name on the door, you can watch a live show. I went down there on the Sunday, my name was on the door. I went backstage to thank him, and he was hosting open mic. He said, you're here, good, you're on. Threw me on stage in front of 150 people. And my maiden 5-minute set was about 17 minutes of old Cole Elliott jokes. I stood out there blank for the first minute, and I could hear him in the wings yelling out, here's one you can use. So it was a good payback, but I got the bug from that. Walked off stage thinking I was the king of comedy, and then the promoter at the time, I went, how good was that? He said, yeah, not bad. Next time, just write your own jokes. I went, oh, fuck, you got to write them as well. So, but I had the bug and kept going back to the open mics in Melbourne, and away we went.
Wow, so 97, you get up there, you graciously do 12 minutes overtime, as everyone appreciates in their shows, and then when's the next time you come back? You just kept coming back to that same room, or you just gigging immediately?
The fella that was headlining on that open mic night was a well-established Australian comedian called Pommy Johnson, and he was hosting a show on the Monday night. This was the Sunday. He said, this show's happening at the Armidale. Come down and watch the show. And I immediately assumed that I was on again. So I've walked to the Armidale on the Monday, and the promoter's on the door taking the money as everyone's walking in. And I said, oh, no, mate, I'm Chris Franklin. I'm on the show tonight. And he said, I'm the promoter, and no, you're fucking not. So Pommy had to come running down and go, oh, I just put your name on the door so you could watch the show. I didn't get on that night. But, went back a few Sundays, realised you had to book in generally. So booked in, did a few Sundays. There was another open mic night at the Star and Garter in South Melbourne. Started going there. Through that, befriended a few people that were open mics at the time. One of them, Bev Kellick, still headlining around the country. Wow. She took me in. I slept on her lounge room floor for about 1.5 years. We wrote jokes together, and yeah.
What a time. What a time. The early vagabondish times. Forgive me, Chris. And I don't want to jump ahead too far, but you've just highlighted that you're homeless in Melbourne in 97. You jump up and do your first open mic. 3 short years later, you've got one of the the number one songs in the country with Bloke, and it's blowing up all around you. I mean, that's such a short amount of time. What was that journey like for you in that 3 years mentally, man? I mean, you're going from that to that.
It was very surreal.
Yeah.
It was a shorter time than that because it was October 97, my first gig, and by April 98, I won the National Raw competition and stood in front of on the Melbourne Town Hall stage in front of 1,000 people for the final of that. Yeah, very surreal. And then a couple of years after that, Bloke came out, and I went from being homeless. I bought a 2-story, 4-bedroom house on Magnetic Island with a pool in the backyard.
That's fantastic, man.
Yeah.
And so you said obviously you started with other people's jokes, as a lot of us do, and then you started to get into your writing process. What was that like for you in the early days? Were you just sort of monologuing your inner thoughts? Were you trying to write jokes in the style of comics you admired? What was it like early days?
I found the writing process, and still do, very hard because I was private school educated. So I wrote correctly, but I was very bogan on stage. So I found that what I wrote didn't match with how I said things.
Right.
So, and at the start, I was writing every word of every joke. It was like a book. For, I wasn't just writing an idea I was writing absolutely. I'd turn up with 27 pages to do a 5-minute set, but and said them all wrong anyway because of the persona on stage. But I learnt very quickly not to write the jokes down, get the idea for the joke, something I saw or whatever, and say it how the bloke would say it on stage. And if I couldn't get a laugh, I'd try it 3 different times, wording it differently each time. If I couldn't get the audience to see what I saw was funny in it, by the 3rd time, I'd just drop it.
It was a rule of 3.
Yeah.
And you'd make the adjustment, but if after 3 times, we're moving on.
Yeah, if they can't get it after 3 times, I can't think of another way to reword this, so that one's gone.
Wow, that's a great tool. I might keep that. And you mentioned you would say it how the bloke would say it, right? Now, obviously, that was your persona on stage. And, I mean, were you creating a character when you were going on stage? Is that sort of how you felt?
That's a really difficult question to answer because I don't feel it's a character.
Of
My
course.
education says otherwise, but my persona on stage is the person I am. It's how I grew up. V8 supercars, Aussie pub rock music, VB cans, drinking too much, chasing women everywhere, and so it was me. But as I said, I couldn't write how I would talk.
It's almost like you actually got to be yourself on stage.
Yeah, pretty
and then
much.
go back to whatever else the construction was.
Off stage is the persona.
Yes, okay. Well, we're on a stage right now, so it's you now, Chris.
Fuck it.
So, you go through, you win Raw in 1998. You're going from Homeless to this time. Then you got Bloke, this thing blows up. You're singing at the grand final.
It wasn't a grand final. That's a misconception.
I apologise. What was it?
It was just a home and away game in the AFL season. It was,
it's still.
Yeah, Richmond versus North Melbourne at the MCG. I'm a North Melbourne supporter. Richmond had employed me to do it, so that was great. And,
great.
That was very surreal. And back when Bloke was out, there wasn't any of this downloadable music or all of that. It was all hard copies, and I grew up with albums, but Bloke was of a time of CDs. So I've coming off after singing, there's 2 12-year-old kids on the fence that are in awe, and one of them said, "Oh, I bought you a single. And I said, "Oh, thanks, mate." And I said, "What about you, young fella?" And he said, "I just burnt his." I got really upset thinking I was 5,000 sales short of double platinum. And if everyone had bought instead of burnt. But then I said to myself, well, we used to have a mate's birthday when we were growing up, and we'd buy them the album of the current, popular album, and we'd record it onto a cassette before we'd give it to him. So we were doing the same thing back then too. So
same thing, costing other artists double platinum.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, man. So you achieve all this success very early on that only a lot of comics could dream of in this time. I mean, what does that do to you mentally in terms of setting goals for yourself, Chris? Like, does this become the norm to you? Where do you go from there? What's the next goal?
I learnt very early in my comedy career never to set any goals.
Wow.
I coming from a homeless situation, anything was a bonus. And if you set goals, you can get disappointed. If you don't set goals and achieve stuff, then it's all a bonus. So everything that's happened's just been a bonus for me. I've never set goals. I'll still do shitty little bars to 4 people and play theatres to 1,000, and the theatres feel great and they're fine, but I still really enjoy getting in those little bars and remembering where I come from. So.
And do you find that has been a key to your longevity as well, because you're not sort of falling out of love with the game because you're doing it for the game, if that makes sense?
I think, ironically, my material has a bit to do with the longevity because it's working class Australian orientated, and there's always going to be working class Australians or someone who identifies with someone who's working class. Every show I do, there's someone comes up and says, "You're just like my uncle, you're just like my brother." And that will always be there, and I think that's why I've managed to get through.
That's great, man. So as the years have gone on, and I mean, your style is sort of evergreen, as you've said, and you've maintained yourself and your self-identity as you progress through. I mean, as you're touring and doing all these things over the decades, what's a great gig to you now? What makes Chris Franklin walk off stage and go, "That was a lot of fun"?
When A large percentage of the audience is happy after my show. It doesn't matter where it is. I mean, beautiful venues like this. This is my favourite room in the country to work. It's set up perfectly for comedy. The audience are here specifically for comedy, and so they're easy to make laugh anyway. So if you have a bad gig at the Comedy Lounge, you should just give up. I think, you know. So yeah, it's just if the audience is happy, you've done your job, and that makes a great gig for me. A lot of comedians will tell you the energy the audience get from the performer is because of the energy from the audience. It's sort of a snowball effect. We'll get more excited and give a better performance if they're getting more into it. So, and that always happens here. So, yeah, love this venue.
We love having you, man. And comedy advice is always, to be taken with a pinch of salt. There's so many different ways to do the thing, but someone like yourself who's been in the game and is still loving it after 28 years, if you could go back to, 16-year-old Chris Franklin and give him some advice for life or the comedy ahead, or even a young comic starting out, is there anything that you would say?
I always say to the young comics, I don't know if I'd say it to 16-year-old Chris because I didn't start comedy until I was 33, but I always say to the young comics, just enjoy yourself. Don't worry about the audience. You're obviously doing this because you like doing it, so don't get nervous and panic. Just make sure you have fun. If you're having fun, that'll be infectious. The audience will have fun as well. So that's
great advice. Take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
Not advice.
There's a reason you're standing on the stage. No one's made you be there.
Yes.
You're there because you want to do it, so make sure you enjoy it.
A way to avoid the self-seriousness. That's great, Chris. And listen, there's also some important. Some would deem them silly questions, but I don't think they are. I think they get to the heart of a man. Chris Franklin, sausage roll or meat pie?
Depends on the day. I'm probably 85% meat pie, but not bad to have a decent sausage roll occasionally. And I'm not talking about a 4 and 20 sausage roll or one of the black and gold brand frozen ones you take home. I'm talking a good roadhouse in the middle of nowhere in Western Australia. It's almost like a meatloaf with a bit of pastry around it. That's a good sausage roll.
You've toured all of Australia. Is there any bakeries that stand out to you that you were like, they do the best?
Not a bakery, but the Pardue Roadhouse in between Port Hedland and Broome.
Wow, okay.
Best sausage rolls in the world.
Wow. You heard it here first, Pardue. They're going to blow up. Their Instagram's going to blow up. This is a silly one. Coles or Woolies? You have a preference?
IGA.
IGA. Trying to destroy the duopoly that's got a grip over our cost of living crisis.
Oh, it's not really political. It's just closer to my house.
Oh, that's a lot of fun. If you could punch one famous celebrity in the face, Chris, if you could and it's no consequence here, any celebrity that just really get under your skin, is there any particular celebrity that you think just deserves a good fucking smack?
Well, there's one that comes to mind, but I don't know if he in general deserves it, but I can only base this answer on people I've met. And there was one that was quite rude to me, and I worked out over the years that may have just been the space he was in on the night. He may not be that person all the time, but he upset me quite a lot, and I actually really almost did punch him in the face that night, and that was Ernie Dingo.
Oh, Ernie Dingo.
Yeah.
My goodness. Must have been I mean, I've heard nothing but positive things, but
he
must have really got under the skin on that
I've
day.
heard all positive things about him, but on the night that I met him, it was quite rude to me.
Ernie almost got it. Yeah, wow. Is there a celebrity that you would love to kiss in the face, Chris?
Oh, nah.
No.
No.
None of them. You're just too busy thinking about catching Ernie.
I'm committed to my partner.
Of course, Chris.
Yeah.
She actually wrote that question. It was a test. Good job. Listen, man, I think it's been a pleasure to get to chat to you. I got no more silly Aussie questions. Where can people find you, Chris?
All over the country. I'm here doing Fringe World at the moment, obviously. Not doing a show specifically. What I generally do at these month-long festivals is just haul myself out to other people's shows, and that way you don't have to pay registration or pay for posters to be made, and you still get a wage. But I don't know how soon this is going to go to air, but next weekend I'm hosting the 6:30 show here at the Lounge.
Oh, great.
Friday and Saturday. So if this is out in the waves before then, come down this weekend.
Awesome. Chris Franklin, thank you so much for your time, man.
Cheers, man.
Appreciate it. Cheers.